Karen screams at us for camping. But we own the land. I never thought I'd have to defend my right to camp on my own property, but here we are. My wife and I bought this beautiful 50-acre piece of land about 2 years ago. It's mostly wooded with a small clearing that overlooks a valley, perfect for camping and eventually building our dream home. We got an amazing deal because it's pretty remote, about 30 minutes outside of town, and the previous owner needed to sell quickly. We've been camping there at least twice a month since we bought it, slowly clearing the land and making plans for our future home. The property has a small gravel access road that connects to the main road, and we always park our truck near the clearing. We've never had any issues until last weekend, when we encountered the neighbor from hell. It started on Friday evening. We had just finished setting up our tent and were getting the campfire going when we heard the unmistakable sound of tires on gravel. I figured it was probably just someone who took a wrong turn. It happens occasionally, since GPS isn't always reliable out here. But instead of turning around, a white SUV came to a stop right next to our campsite. A woman who looked to be in her 50s got out, designer purse clutched to her chest like she was in some dangerous neighborhood instead of the middle of nowhere. "Excuse me," she called out in that tone that tells you the person isn't actually trying to be polite. "What do you think you're doing?" I stood up from the fire pit. "We're camping. Can I help you with something?" She marched closer, her expensive-looking shoes completely inappropriate for the terrain. "You can't camp here. This is private property." I tried not to laugh. "Yes, it is private property. It's our private property. We own this land." Her face turned red. "No, this is my land. I own everything past the main road. You need to pack up and leave immediately or I'm calling the police." My wife joined me by the fire pit. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We bought this property 2 years ago. We have all the documentation." The woman, let's call her Karen since she fits the stereotype perfectly, pulled out her phone. "I don't care what documentation you think you have. I've owned this whole area for 20 years. You have 30 minutes to clear out before I call the cops." I sighed and walked to our truck to get the property deed and survey maps we always keep handy. When I returned, Karen was lecturing my wife about homeless people taking over the countryside and ruining it for legitimate property owners like herself. "Here," I said, holding out the papers. "This shows we own this 50-acre parcel. If you look at the survey map, you can see your property line ends at the gravel road." Karen didn't even glance at the documents. "Those could be fake. I'm calling the police right now." "Go ahead," I replied calmly. "We'll wait right here since, it's our property." She stormed back to her SUV, phone pressed to her ear. I could hear her voice getting higher and higher as she demanded police come immediately to remove dangerous trespassers from her land. My wife and I went back to setting up camp. I got the fire going properly while she set up our chairs and started preparing dinner. Karen stayed in her SUV, watching us like a hawk and presumably waiting for the police. About 45 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy's truck pulled up. Karen jumped out of her SUV and rushed over to him before he could even get out of his vehicle. "Finally, I want them arrested immediately," she shrieked, pointing at us. The deputy, whose nameplate read Anderson, stepped out calmly. "Evening, folks. Having some trouble out here?" I walked over with our documentation. "No trouble on our end, deputy. We're just camping on our own property. This lady seems to think she owns the land, but we have all the paperwork right here." Deputy Anderson reviewed our documents carefully, while Karen kept trying to interrupt, insisting they were forged. He finally held up a hand to quiet her. "Ma'am, these documents are legitimate. I actually remember when this property was sold 2 years ago. These folks are the legal owners." Karen's face went through about 5 different shades of red. "That's impossible. I own all this land. My property extends all the way to the Johnson farm." The deputy shook his head. "No, ma'am, your property line ends at the gravel access road. You can check the county records if you don't believe me." "This is ridiculous," Karen exploded. "I'm going to sue all of you. You can't just let random people camp wherever they want." "They're not random people and they're not camping wherever they want," Deputy Anderson explained patiently. They're the legal property owners camping on their own land. Now, I suggest you return to your property before we have a different kind of problem." Karen stood there fuming for a moment before stomping back to her SUV. She slammed the door so hard I thought she might break a window, then peeled out on the gravel road, sending rocks flying. The deputy turned to us. "Folks, I'd recommend installing some cameras out here. Something tells me this isn't over." We thanked him for his help, and he left. My wife and I tried to enjoy the rest of our evening, but Karen had definitely put a damper on things. We were just finishing dinner when we heard another vehicle approaching. This time it was a man in a pickup truck who introduced himself as Karen's husband. He was actually pretty apologetic. "I'm really sorry about my wife earlier," he said, looking embarrassed. She's having a hard time accepting that we don't own as much land as she thinks we do. We bought our place last year, and the real estate agent might have been a little vague about the property lines." I appreciated his honesty. "No worries, we just want to enjoy our land in peace." He nodded. "I understand. I'll try to talk some sense into her, but you might want to watch out. She can be pretty persistent when she thinks she's right." Boy, was that an understatement. Over the next few weeks, we installed trail cameras as the deputy suggested. Good thing, too, because Karen started showing up regularly to harass us whenever we were there. One weekend, we arrived to find survey stakes pulled up and thrown around. The cameras caught Karen doing it, along with her spray painting "No Trespassing" on some trees. We called the sheriff's department again and filed a report for vandalism. Another time, she blocked the access road with her SUV and refused to move, claiming it was her private road. That earned her another visit from law enforcement and a stern warning about criminal charges if she continued. But the real kicker came when we arrived one Friday evening to find Karen had set up her own tent in our clearing. She was sitting in a lawn chair, bold as brass, acting like she owned the place. "You've got to be kidding me," my wife muttered as we pulled up. I was already on the phone with the sheriff's department. This had gone beyond ridiculous. When Deputy Anderson arrived, he'd handled most of our calls about Karen. She tried to claim she was just exercising her right to enjoy nature. The deputy wasn't having any of it. "Ma'am, this is your final warning," he said firmly. "The next time I have to come out here, you'll be leaving in handcuffs. These folks have been more than patient with you." Karen finally packed up and left, but not before screaming that we'd regret stealing her land. That's when we decided enough was enough. The next day, we contacted a lawyer. Our attorney reviewed all our documentation and the reports we'd filed about Karen's harassment. She helped us file for a restraining order and suggested we sue for damages related to the vandalism and harassment. Karen naturally countersued, claiming she had historical rights to the property and that we had somehow tricked the previous owner into selling it to us instead of her. Her lawsuit was about as coherent as her previous claims. The judge took one look at our documentation versus her rambling complaints and dismissed her case immediately. She granted our restraining order and ordered Karen to pay for removing her spray paint from the trees and replacing the survey stakes she'd destroyed. But we weren't done. Our lawyer helped us file a civil suit for harassment and damages. Karen represented herself in court, which went about as well as you'd expect. She tried to present a deed that looked like it had been made in Microsoft Word, claimed she had witnesses who would testify the land had been in her family for generations. None showed up, and even accused the judge of being part of a conspiracy when things didn't go her way. The judge was not amused. She awarded us $25,000 in damages and made the restraining order permanent. Karen would have to stay at least 500 feet from our property line or face criminal charges. We used part of the settlement money to install a proper gate at the access road and put up security cameras. We also had the property lines professionally marked with "No Trespassing" signs every 50 feet. These days, we can finally enjoy our land in peace. Karen still lives next door, but the threat of jail time seems to be keeping her in check. We've actually started breaking ground for our house, and it's satisfying to know that every cement truck that drives past her place is a reminder that she lost. The best part? Several other neighbors have reached out to apologize for not warning us about Karen sooner. Apparently, she's pulled similar stunts with other property owners, always insisting she owns land that isn't hers. Her husband finally filed for divorce last month, citing her increasingly erratic behavior as one of the main reasons. Looking back, I'm glad we stood our ground and handled everything legally instead of stooping to her level. It would have been easy to retaliate when she vandalized our property or tried to block access, but documenting everything and letting the law handle it was definitely the right call. We still camp out there regularly, and each time we have a peaceful weekend, it feels like a small victory. Our dream home is slowly taking shape, and soon we'll be living there full-time. Karen will just have to deal with seeing us every day. You know what they say, good fences make good neighbors. In our case, good fences, security cameras, and a restraining order made an entitled neighbor finally back off. I've learned a lot from this experience, mainly that some people will never admit they're wrong, no matter how much evidence you show them. But I've also learned that standing up for your rights, documenting everything, and handling things through proper legal channels usually works out in the end. These days, whenever we have a campfire under the stars, we appreciate our peaceful little piece of paradise even more. Sometimes dealing with difficult people makes you value the good times that much more. Just last weekend, we were enjoying our usual camping spot when we heard a vehicle on the access road. For a split second, I tensed up, thinking Karen was back to her old tricks. But it was just Deputy Anderson stopping by to check on us and let us know Karen had finally put her house up for sale. Looks like we won't have to worry about entitled neighbors much longer. Though I have to admit, I'm keeping those security cameras running just in case the next owners are cut from the same cloth. You can never be too careful when it comes to protecting what's yours. The whole experience has actually brought us closer to our other neighbors. They often stop by to chat when we're camping, and several have offered to keep an eye on the property when we're not there. It's nice to know that most people understand and respect property rights, even if a few entitled Karens don't. As for our future plans, the house is coming along nicely. We're hoping to be moved in by next spring. And you better believe we're installing the best security system money can buy, just in case Karen gets any ideas before she moves away. Sometimes I wonder what makes people like Karen tick. What makes someone so entitled they think they can just claim land that isn't theirs? But I try not to dwell on it too much. We've got our piece of paradise, and no amount of entitled behavior can take that away from us now. Last night, as we sat around the campfire planning where our future garden will go, I realized something important. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's living well and not letting difficult people steal your joy. We may have had to fight for our right to enjoy our own property, but in the end, we won. And that's what matters. Though I have to admit, seeing Karen's for sale sign go up was pretty satisfying too. Update. Wow, I didn't expect my original post to get so much attention. A lot has happened in the past 6 months, so I figured I'd share how everything turned out. Grab some popcorn because Karen's final meltdown was truly something to behold. First, remember how I mentioned Karen had put her house up for sale? Well, that turned into quite a saga. She listed the property for nearly double its actual value, claiming it came with 50 acres of pristine wilderness views. Several potential buyers contacted us after viewing the property, asking about the supposedly included acreage. We had to explain that no, our land wasn't part of the sale. One couple actually showed us the listing photos. Karen had taken pictures of our clearing and future house site, advertising them as part of her property. We immediately had our lawyer send her realtor a cease and desist letter. The realtor, who clearly had no idea about Karen's history with us, was mortified and pulled the fraudulent listing the same day. Karen predictably lost it. She started telling anyone who would listen that we were trying to steal her views and tank her property value. She even posted a long rant on the community Facebook page claiming we had ruined the natural beauty of the area by starting construction on our house. That backfired spectacularly when several neighbors chimed in to set the record straight. They shared their own stories about Karen's entitled behavior over the years. Turns out she'd tried to claim parts of other people's land too, but most folks had just given in to avoid conflict. We were apparently the first ones to stand up to her properly. The real entertainment started when Karen violated the restraining order. Our security cameras caught her sneaking onto our property at night, putting up "private property, no building allowed" signs. Deputy Anderson was not amused when we showed him the footage. "Ma'am," he said when confronting her, "I thought I was very clear about what would happen if you trespassed again." Karen tried to claim she was protecting the environment from our construction. That excuse didn't fly with the judge, who had her spend 3 days in county jail for violating the order. Her husband filed for divorce the next week. But the best part? Karen's replacement realtor did some research and discovered she'd been lying about her own property boundaries for years. She had actually encroached on her other neighbor's land, building a garden shed about 10 feet over the line. That neighbor promptly demanded she remove it. When Karen refused, claiming adverse possession, she'd clearly been Googling legal terms, that neighbor sued. The judge was the same one who handled our case and recognized Karen's pattern of entitled behavior. She not only had to remove the shed, but pay significant damages. Meanwhile, construction on our house has been going great. We're almost finished with the exterior, and the view from our future living room is absolutely spectacular. Every time we're out there working, neighbors stop by to chat and check on our progress. The community support has been amazing. One elderly couple who lives down the road brought us old photos showing what the land looked like back in the 1960s. Turns out Karen's claims about her family historically owning the property were even more ridiculous than we thought. It had belonged to the same family from 1908 until we bought it in 2021. The real karma hit when Karen's house finally sold, for about 60% of her original asking price. The new owners are a lovely young couple who actually came to introduce themselves properly. They had heard rumors about Karen and wanted to assure us they understood property boundaries and respected property rights. "We've dealt with entitled neighbors before," the wife told us. "Don't worry, we're nothing like that." They even offered to help us with landscaping once we're done with construction. It's amazing what a difference good neighbors can make. But Karen wasn't quite done with her shenanigans. The day she was moving out, our cameras caught her trying one last time to cause trouble. She drove her moving truck onto our access road and broke down right at the entrance to our property, conveniently blocking access to our construction crews. When we called to have the truck towed, she started screaming about how we were heartless monsters who couldn't even let her move out in peace. Deputy Anderson showed up yet again. I think he's gotten pretty tired of Karen's antics by now. "Ma'am," he said, "your truck is miraculously going to start working right now, or you're going to jail again. Your choice." Surprisingly, the truck started right up. Karen peeled out of there so fast she left tire marks on the gravel. As she was driving away, her moving truck's back door flew open, dumping some of her boxes all over the road. Karma? Maybe, but we still helped pick up her stuff and got it to the new owners to return to her. Kill 'em with kindness, right? The best news came last week. Karen's ex-husband stopped by to apologize again for everything. He told us she's moved 3 hours away to live with her sister. He seemed like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. "I should have put a stop to her behavior years ago," he admitted. "She's always been entitled, but it got so much worse after we moved here. She convinced herself she was some kind of landed gentry and everyone else was beneath her." He also revealed something interesting. Karen had never actually owned property before moving here. She'd always lived in apartments or rented houses. Apparently, getting her name on a deed went straight to her head. Our house should be finished in about 2 months. We're planning a big housewarming party and inviting all the neighbors who supported us through Karen's reign of terror. Several people have asked if we'll still go camping in our clearing once the house is done. Absolutely we will. That spot holds special meaning for us now. It's where we stood our ground against entitled behavior and won. Plus, there's something satisfying about sitting around a campfire on land that someone tried to claim wasn't ours. We've made some improvements to the camping area too. Built a proper fire pit with stone seating, put in some solar lights along the path, and created a level pad for the tent. It's become a favorite spot for stargazing. The new neighbors have already asked if their kids can camp out there sometime. We're thinking of hosting regular community bonfires once we're settled in. Turning Karen's source of entitlement into a place for bringing people together feels like the perfect ending to this whole saga. Looking back, I'm actually kind of grateful for the Karen experience. It brought us closer to our neighbors, taught us the importance of documenting everything, and showed us that standing up to entitled behavior is worth the hassle. Plus, it's a great story to tell around the campfire. Our security cameras are still running though. Once bitten, twice shy, as they say. But these days they mostly capture wildlife instead of trespassing Karens. Last week we got some amazing footage of a family of deer hanging out in our clearing. Much better than catching entitled neighbors putting up fake no trespassing signs. One final bit of karma. Remember those trees Karen spray painted? They're right where our new picture window will be. Instead of cutting them down, we're going to clean them up and put up a little plaque, dedicated to the neighbor who taught us the value of patience, persistence, and proper documentation. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. We stood our ground, stayed legal, and came out on top. Karen lost her marriage, her house, and her reputation. All because she couldn't accept that she didn't own land that was never hers to begin with. I've learned that entitled people rarely change their ways, but they can be stopped if you're willing to stand firm and do things the right way. Document everything, know your rights, and don't let them bully you into giving up what's rightfully yours. Our piece of paradise is even sweeter now, knowing we fought for it and won. And every time we sit around that campfire under the stars, we appreciate it just a little bit more. Life is peaceful these days. Construction is almost done, the neighbors are friendly, and our security cameras haven't caught any entitled trespassers in months. Sometimes I almost miss the drama. Almost. But I'll take quiet evenings around the campfire over dealing with Karens any day of the week. Though I have to admit, sometimes when we're sitting out there roasting marshmallows, we raise our s'mores in a silent toast to Karen wherever she is for teaching us that home isn't just about the land you own. It's about being willing to stand up for what's right, building community with good neighbors, and not letting entitled people steal your joy. Here's hoping our next update will just be photos of the finished house. No Karens included.